Good evening, I'm Adrienne Arsenault.
And I'm Andrew Chang. Tonight, Tiger Woods is taken to hospital with multiple injuries.
He was alive and he was conscious.
Will he be okay, and will he golf competitively again?
Also tonight, teams Trudeau and Biden get to work.
We're all best served when the United States and Canada work together.
The meetings were virtual. Are the improved relations real?
A failure to protect under international human rights law.
A scathing assessment of Iran in a new Flight 752 report.
And vaccine questions from seniors for seniors.
I'm not able to get out to a clinic.
Answers are just ahead. This is The National. Tiger Woods is in serious condition in a California hospital tonight following a single vehicle accident in Los Angeles.
Woods was rushed into surgery this morning for multiple leg injuries, and investigators are now trying to figure out what happened. Woods enjoyed a career renaissance in 2019, winning his first major championship in more than a decade, his previous personal struggles seemingly behind him. Tonight, his golfing future is in question. Here's Ellen Morrow with what we know so far.
Right there, that's probably where they had to get him out to break through that windshield.
Tiger Woods pulled from this mangled wreckage early this morning.
You can see the airbags were deployed.
Despite the gut-wrenching damage, Woods' condition not life-threatening.
He was alive and he was conscious. No evidence of impairment at this point in time.
It's unclear what caused the crash. No other vehicles were involved.
That area has a high frequency of accidents. Is not uncommon.
The crash, the injuries, just the latest adversity to face the golf superstar, still recovering from his 5th back surgery last month.
I'm feeling fine. I'm a little bit stiff.
On the weekend, Woods mused about a 2021 Masters comeback.
Gotta hope so.
But here it is.
That's exactly what the golf legend did 2 years ago. Woods winning the Masters in 2019 after another back surgery.
You can never count him out.
Canadian Sean Foley is Woods' former coach and longtime friend.
His ability to deal with adversity, that's what the greats have, right? They're not more secure or confident than all of us, and that's why they stand the test of time.
Woods' redemption was not just on the course. He rehabilitated his public image, too. After very public revelations of Woods' infidelity, he and Elin Nordegren divorced in 2010. In 2017, Woods pleaded guilty to reckless driving after a DUI charge. The icon lost sponsorship, stepped away from the game, only to come back better than ever. A Black and Asian American dominating in a traditionally white sport.
As an Asian American, I identified with Tiger culturally, but as well as in terms of his achievements, personal achievements, career achievements.
For now, the focus not on those achievements, but on Woods' health and a swift recovery. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
And reaction was pouring in all day from the golf world, including from Woods' close personal friends like fellow golfer Justin Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sick to my stomach. Man, I just hope he's all right.
So the PGA has offered its full support on Twitter today. English golfer Justin Rose tweeted his hopes for a full recovery as well. So did Jack Nicklaus, the man whose majors record Woods was chasing.
We're following another developing story tonight, a virtual bilateral meeting today between the Prime Minister and the U.S. President. Joe Biden's first since taking office, kicking off a relationship reset after 4 rocky years.
We stand united to beat this pandemic and build a better tomorrow.
The pandemic, the economy, the two Michaels, it all came up in conversation as the two laid out a path forward. David Cochran takes us through it.
All right, take it away, go.
The face masks and the flat screens show how different things are in the moment.
We have a robust agenda today, and we're all best served when the United States and Canada work together and lead together.
The tone and the agenda show how different things can be from now on.
Thank you again for stepping up in such a big way on tackling climate change. U.S. leadership has been sorely missed over the past years.
There's nothing subtle about that. The Trudeau government has been eager for the reset in Canada-U.S. relations Joe Biden presents. That reset started with a setback, the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, and it's progressing through the uncertainty of Biden's Buy American policy. But there's a trust and goodwill that's been missing for 4 years.
We're facing tough times, there's no doubt, but we're not facing them alone.
Underscoring that point, Biden urging China to release Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor.
Human beings are not bartering chips. You know, we're going to work together until we get their safe return.
The leaders spelled out broad plans for a coordinated agenda on security.
We agreed to reestablish the Cross-Border Crime Forum and work together to modernize our approach to community safety.
On the post-COVID recovery,
to create good, well-paying jobs and help people who've been hardest hit get back on their feet.
On climate change.
And to align our policies and our goals and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
Getting back to working with each other after years of working against each other.
Merci, mon ami.
Thank you, Justin. Au revoir.
Bonsoir.
Okay, so some really big ambitions there, David, but you know, how do they actually make this happen?
Yeah, there's not a lot of clear specifics yet, Adrian, but what's come out of this is a high-level blueprint for cooperation, and the idea is to give clear direction to cabinet members on both sides of the border that these are the priorities and this is what is expected of you. And the importance of that was underscored by the large number of top people from both countries involved in this today. 25 people when you combine the leaders, their top cabinet members, and senior staff. And this is really just a starting point because, after all, Adrian, Joe Biden, he's only been president for a month.
All right, David, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, Biden was surely keeping his eye on the U.S. Senate as well, where hearings began into the riots by Trump supporters on Capitol Hill last month. As Stephen D'Souza explains, security and intelligence officials blamed each other for letting it happen.
To anyone who watched, it was obvious. Those entrusted with protecting the U.S. Capitol on January 6th were woefully unprepared.
Do you swear that the testimony...
Today, at the first Senate hearing into what happened, 3 former law enforcement officials, all of whom resigned in the wake of the Capitol Hill riots, tried to explain why they were overwhelmed that day.
These criminals came prepared for war.
They claimed they had beefed up security, but blamed bad intelligence that failed to warn them about the seriousness of the threat.
We properly planned for a mass demonstration with possible violence. What we got was a military-style coordinated assault on my officers and a violent takeover of the Capitol building.
Senators heard today a key warning from an FBI field office about potential violence never reached senior leaders. The former officials, speaking publicly for the first time, pointed the finger at each other for the failure to activate the National Guard when the situation spiraled out of control.
Everyone was very satisfied that we had a robust plan, security plan, that was consistent with the intelligence that we had at the time.
Fingers were also pointed at the Pentagon. Claims that as Capitol and D.C. police pleaded for the National Guard, the Army responded with concerns about optics.
I was just stunned that, I have officers that were out there literally fighting for their lives from the U.S. Department of the Army. It was no, we're not denying the request, but they were concerned. They did have concerns. So I was just stunned at that response.
The former Capitol Police chief said intelligence agencies did not take the threat of white supremacists and extremists seriously enough, an issue that's sure to come up at the next hearing when Defense Department officials will be among those in the hot seat. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
The Chinese government has fired back at Ottawa a day after the House of Commons voted to declare China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims a genocide. China's foreign ministry said the motion disregarded facts and common sense, calling it a blatant interference in China's internal affairs. A spokesperson also slammed Ottawa's push to have the 2022 Winter Olympics moved from Beijing, saying Canadian politicians are politicizing sports against the Olympic spirit.
And new developments in the investigation of Iran's downing of Flight 752 that killed dozens of Canadians early last year. A UN special rapporteur on the subject of executions now accuses Iran of intentionally misleading the world about what really happened that night. Ashley Burke explains.
The new investigation says the wrongdoing of the shootdown itself continued well after. The crash site looted, then bulldozed, families denied access, some harassed. The tragedy compounded with a cover-up designed to confuse and mislead.
The reckless nature of the mistakes have led many, including myself, to question whether the downing of flight PS752 was intentional.
She says Iran failed to respect the right to life of 176 people on board Flight 752.
The failure to close Iran airspace, in my opinion, amounts to a failure to protect under international human rights law.
14 months ago, Iran kept commercial planes flying just hours after firing missiles at a U.S. base in Iraq. Retaliation for the U.S. killing of a top Iranian general. Iran later said a wing of its military mistook Flight 752 for a hostile target, and it only had 10 seconds to decide to fire. Today's findings suggest it would have had 45 seconds or more, and noted planes flying the same route earlier escaped attack, one of many contradictions laid out.
The mere fact that she has decided to investigate the destruction of PS752 suggests that it was, if not intentional, at the very least foreseeable and preventable loss of human life.
I think it's a turning point.
Hamid Ismailian's wife and daughter died on the plane. He says victims' families are done waiting on Iran for answers and want Canada and the international community to take action.
We are frustrated. We are still waiting for reactions. We want to see words turn to actions, and we are still waiting. We are here, we are alive, and we want to see the truth and justice one day.
Okay, so Ashley, what does happen next?
Well, Andrew, Calamara sent Iran a letter detailing questions she has. Now, if and when she gets a response, she can submit a final report to the UN Human Rights Council, which could potentially become evidence in future international legal proceedings. And that's what victims' families want, this to end up at the International Court of Justice. Canada has said it's open to that, but only if all other avenues fail first. And it plans to review this report carefully.
Okay, we'll be watching. Ashley Burke, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Turning to COVID-19, we can so easily get lost in bad news about the pandemic, but there is some good news. COVID-19 deaths are a third of what they were a month ago, though still an average of 52 people a day. And if we want that decline to keep going, new cases need to keep dropping, but they aren't. Average daily cases in Canada have been flat now for about a week, and the thing is, that's still a lot of transmission. When the first wave bottomed out last summer, the country was seeing around 300 cases a day. Right now, it's about 10 times that. Canada's top doctor reminds us the dream of returning to normal, that is still just a dream for now.
This period of time, as I said, this first quarter is going to be very difficult. First quarter 2021. Next quarter, more vaccines. You can't put an absolute date on one of these things, but having had everybody getting the vaccine, that is a massive step towards returning to a more normal life.
It will be. The problem, of course, is that less than 3% of Canadians have received even a single dose of the vaccine.
Now in Quebec, it's closer to 4%, and that province is now opening up vaccinations to anyone aged 85 or older, though it's less ambitious than had been expected.
Hopefully, that 75 will be right behind that 85 as quickly as possible, but we need to trace the line somewhere.
The plan to start in the Montreal area and extend to the rest of the province over the course of the next 2 weeks, with bookings opening Thursday. In Alberta, anyone 75 and older can book an appointment to get the shot starting tomorrow. The plan there is to get all Albertan seniors at least one dose by the end of March.
Now, until most of the population is vaccinated, those who are immunized will be a lucky minority. Manitoba is among the provinces considering giving them vaccine passports. The Cameron McIntosh explains a passport for some could be a barrier for others.
Next month, more needles should be going in more arms in Manitoba, but not at the pace of the U.S. and other countries.
It's going to be very, very challenging to...
So Manitoba's premier says the province will issue a card for use internationally to anyone who's vaccinated, while conceding it could cause problems locally.
So there's a balance and we'll have to be very careful as we discuss and as we review this balance.
The card is still being developed, and while it's intended to be used only outside of Manitoba, vaccination cards and so-called vaccine passports have become a contentious issue globally over fears of unintended consequences. The British and Canadian governments have both rejected the notion for fear it will be used locally to deny services to those who can't be vaccinated.
Extreme measures that could have real divisive impacts on community and country.
Denmark and Israel have gone the other way, using digital passports as passes to their reopening economies, amid plenty of moral and legal questions about those who can't be vaccinated. Concerns shared by Canadian disability groups.
I don't think people should be denied goods and services for the sheer fact of not carrying a passport that suggests that they've been vaccinated.
Legal experts call it a very slippery slope.
Who can demand to see that information? Can my employer get access? Can my insurance company get access? Can law enforcement get access?
Then there's questions about the science.
The data is not very determinative as to whether these vaccines prevent somebody from being a carrier.
All valid concerns, says Pallister, who promises to keep an eye on it.
So it's a tough issue, and I never want to see individuals discriminated against.
The more people vaccinated, the less it becomes an issue, no matter what lies in the cards. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, thousands of asylum seekers to Canada are waiting on the sidelines right now. They want to work but can't because of a long and growing wait list for work permits. Alison Northcott looks at a normally routine process that has been dragging on and on.
Marius Tapé is from Ivory Coast and arrived in Canada as an asylum seeker in July, but he's still waiting for a work permit so he can get a job. He's getting social assistance, but says he doesn't want to rely on that to support his family. He wants to work. This immigration lawyer says COVID-19 has complicated things. The federal government temporarily suspended in-person eligibility interviews required to get a work permit. And while some are set to start up again soon, there are still delays.
And these people are a bit in a limbo. They want to work, they want to get their claims processed, and they're unable to get an appointment with Immigration Canada.
The Refugee Lawyers Association of Ontario is asking the federal government to temporarily allow refugee claimants to work without that meeting.
A person is told, well, you're not allowed to work without a work permit, so without authorization to work. And at the same time, we're kind of asking them not to be a burden on society through social assistance. But it leaves them in a precarious situation.
He says the fear is that some frustrated claimants could turn to under-the-table work instead. In a statement, a spokesperson for the immigration minister says they have resumed some in-person services and have begun holding virtual interviews for applicants, both of which will help clear the backlog.
I don't think anybody gonna argue that COVID-19 is sort of wrench into the whole plan.
This lawyer says she's seen delays across the system for economic immigrants and spousal sponsorships too.
It's just the heightened anxiety level for our client, not knowing what's going on.
She says the issue needs to be resolved, especially with the government's new 3-year plan to bring in more than 1 million new immigrants. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Should people who suffer from mental illness only be able to access medical help to end their lives? That is the question being debated urgently on Parliament Hill, a move the federal government is now ready to pursue. Catherine Cullen looks at the deep disagreements about whether it's the right course.
We understand the seriousness of mental illness.
The Justice Minister says the government was always going to tackle this complex issue. It wasn't part of the proposed law a year ago to let more Canadians get medical help to die, but some prodding from the Senate now means the Liberals are ready to extend their plans to Canadians suffering only from mental illness.
It was always the case that mental illness was going to be considered. And it was always going to be the case that it was going to be taken seriously.
Now, there's a time limit. The Liberal plan is that 2 years after the new law is passed, those with mental illness would then be able to get a doctor's help to die. In that time, an expert panel would be set up to recommend how to proceed, and Parliament would also form a committee to study this and other complex questions. The Liberals are now locked in a debate with Conservatives over whether this goes too far.
This came as a
shocking revelation given the difficulty people have in accessing mental health treatment across this country.
The senator who called for the change in the first place says it's discrimination not to include the mentally ill.
For those people who have lived for years, who've tried every form of treatment that they could find and that is tolerable to them and are still suffering intolerably, that's unethical to not respond to their needs.
But opinions are sharply divided, including those who argue there needs to be better access to mental health care first.
I think it's a dangerous step, but we have got to invest in the other options for the suffering to end before we invest in this one.
It is a political debate about the fundamentals of life, and the clock is ticking. A court-imposed deadline looms Friday with no political consensus in sight. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Buckingham Palace says Prince Philip is being treated for an infection and will remain in hospital for at least a few more days. The Duke of Edinburgh is said to be comfortable and responding to treatment in a London hospital. The 99-year-old was admitted last Tuesday as a precaution, according to the palace, after feeling unwell.
Well, pest control companies say business is booming since the start of the pandemic.
People have said they've lived there for 25, 30 years and never once seen a rat, and now there's literally hundreds.
Next on The National, why the rodents are on the move.
Seniors, you sent us your COVID questions.
I'm not able to get out to a clinic.
How can we convince them that it's fine, it's okay to get the shots?
So we called the doctors for some answers.
And taking kids on a field trip without ever leaving home.
They were excited to try it out.
A little good news during the pandemic. We're back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back. So many Canadians ended up out of work because of COVID. You might be surprised to know that business is booming for the pest control industry. Katie Nicholson shows us how the pandemic is prompting rats to roam.
Telltale footprints in the snow.
This is actually good right now. Apparently this lane had hundreds of rats.
Fewer rats here, but elsewhere, it's a different story.
Huge increase, our best years ever in residential.
Since the start of the pandemic, Dale Kurt's pest control company has had a 20% bump in calls in Toronto.
People have said they've lived there for 25, 30 years and never once seen a rat, and now there's literally hundreds around those areas, and you're seeing them as you're walking down the sidewalk.
In Montreal, another company, Skedaddle, says its calls are up 30%. Pest control is an essential service, and it's growing.
There was a job opening and I just kind of jumped on it.
Claudio Siciliano lost his job in the restaurant industry. He says pest control isn't that big a leap.
Reassuring people, making sure that they feel comfortable, that we're going to take care of them.
The city of Montreal says overall complaints about rats are up 9.5%. In Vancouver, they're up 7%. Biologists say it's not necessarily because there are more rats, it's because they've switched up their turf.
It would make intuitive sense that they would move from highly commercial areas with a lot of restaurant food waste as a food resource to more residential areas where people are hunkering down and preparing their own food.
He says rooting them out after the pandemic won't be easy. And with spring coming, it's about to get worse.
This is when all the babies are born, so our call volumes, are going to go up even further.
Not just rats, other pest populations are poised to explode. Less traffic during lockdown meant less roadkill last year.
There's going to be a real boom of wildlife population as well as rodents, mice and rats.
Good news for him, costly for homeowners. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, there's something to look forward to. Next, we are taking your questions about seniors and COVID-19.
How can we convince them that it's fine, it's okay to get the shots?
I'm not able to get out to a clinic for this vaccination.
The doctors give us their insight after the break. Plus,
if I were grading it, I'd give it an F.
Frustration from seniors south of the border who should be able to but can't get the vaccine. Was it too soon to offer it to so many people? Well, COVID-19 vaccines are now slowly being rolled out to more Canadian seniors. Every province has its own plan, but they'll all be able to learn lessons from the rollouts down south in the United States. Briar Stewart takes us to Washington State, where many seniors are discovering just because you're eligible for a shot doesn't mean it's easy to get one.
In Washington State, anyone over the age of 65 is eligible for a vaccine now. The problem is actually getting an appointment.
If you're looking for really cool concert tickets and you want to go see Beyonce in the first row, you've got to be there right on the second they open. It's kind of like that.
Angela Rosman found that out the hard way when she tried to book appointments for her elderly relatives.
On this website, the state government lists every single place where you can get a vaccine, but you have to click on each individual location to see if there's an appointment, and there's no guarantee that it will still be there by the time you hit submit.
If I were grading it, I'd give it an F.
That's Fran Goldman's assessment of the booking process. When she finally snagged an appointment, a snowstorm didn't hold her back. The 90-year-old walked 10 kilometers round trip to get the vaccine.
Important to me to be able to see my family. I now have a date in 4 weeks to have dinner with my daughter who has already been vaccinated.
But not everyone is as mobile or as tech savvy. If they're lucky, they know someone they can ask for help.
I'm a dinosaur when it comes to technology, and as a result, he's our go-to person.
And for Saskatchewan native Jim Mickleborough, that person is his son-in-law, a former manager at Microsoft. Even he found the process challenging.
I worked at it pretty hard twice for about 2 or 3 days each time, and it's really a matter of being lucky to get an appointment.
After the booking, he turned his attention to the system. He enlisted a friend to build a website that combines all the information and shows which places have spots available. 130 volunteers are helping out with the project.
We would love to be put out of business, really. We want the Department of Health to take this over.
State officials say they're working to improve access, but experts say there are lessons to be learned.
I think it is problematic if you open that up too wide too soon.
And Dr. William Moss says many other states are struggling with their online booking systems too.
That whole process has been fraught, and I think it's led to under-vaccination, if you will, of some of those top priority groups.
That includes seniors from the Black and Hispanic communities, a group that Angela Rosman is trying to help.
Happy to see that my Spanish is still good enough that I was able to get people appointments.
After she got her relatives a vaccine appointment, she joined a Facebook group of volunteers putting their online skills to use.
It's not just about getting the information out there so people can book, because if that's the case, it's going to be the younger folks, it's going to be the people that have advocates for them. And so what we're really trying to do is level the playing field.
And some are certainly appreciative. People who finally managed to get a shot, which could save their life. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
This week, we are receiving a total of 643,000 doses of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, the largest shipment to date.
And so, with more vaccines on the way for Canadians, many provinces and territories are planning to begin vaccinating seniors living independently in the community. Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island have already started. Alberta will be providing vaccines for seniors 75 and older starting tomorrow. And Ontario hopes to vaccinate people 80 and up in the coming weeks. So we heard from many seniors who had questions such as how these vaccines perform in older people, how they'll know it's their turn to get the shot. So to help us answer some of those questions, we're joined now by Dr. Samir Sinha, the Director of Geriatrics at Sinai Health System in Toronto, and Dr. Maria Chung, a geriatrician based in Vancouver. Thank you both for joining us. Let me start with you, Dr. Chung, if I may. You are a geriatrician who does visits with seniors in Vancouver, and I'm curious what concerns you about them right now.
Yes, I spend 3 half days a week doing visits for homebound seniors who need geriatric consultation. And they have really taken a hit this year, physically, mentally, emotionally, and their caregivers as well. So 70% of care in the community is provided by family caregivers. So those are friends and family. And they have been quite overwhelmed by the care needs of their seniors who now cannot go out. The community centers are closed. The adult day centers are closed. A lot of them have dismissed their homemakers because they're afraid of COVID coming into the homes. And they're very, very, very distressed at this point in time. And I think that anything that can be done to help them, including the vaccine, I think will be very helpful.
When it comes to the vaccines, we understand that some seniors may face challenges in getting them. We had this question sent to us. Have a listen.
I'm not able to get out to a clinic for this vaccination, and I wonder if there's been discussion about the local health authorities being able to send a healthcare professional to the home to do a vaccination.
So this is a question for British Columbia. So Dr. Chung, again, to you, if I may, is there a plan to make vaccines more accessible for seniors in BC?
So if you are known to the health authorities, so in other words, if you are getting home care and you are a housebound senior, there is a plan to have nurses bring the vaccines to people's homes to give the vaccine, which is really good news. My concern is what will happen to those homebound seniors who are not receiving public health services, but may instead be getting them from families or from private pay home care. I'm not sure how they will be included in this, and I don't know how they're going to be able to find everybody, because obviously some seniors, if they're hearing impaired or they're not computer literate and are not on the internet, I don't know how they're going to reach out to them, because as you know, not all seniors have family physicians.
Well, Dr. Sinha, let's talk about that, because there are seniors who may not, again, have access to the internet or be able to call to book an appointment to get a vaccine. In Ontario, what is the plan to reach those people?
Well, right now in Ontario, they're looking at having the 34 public health units, create local strategies and plans. So we've heard about a website and a phone line that will be launched. But really, when it comes down to many seniors, many don't actually have primary care providers or are homebound and can't get out to a mass vaccination clinic or even to a local pharmacy. And so we're going to be using a same strategy that for those who are known to the home care programs, we usually will use paramedics and other professionals and community nurses to get into the homes to vaccinate them. And we're hoping to create similar systems for other people who are homebound, who wouldn't readily be able to access a vaccine, because the sooner we get the most seniors vaccinated, the better we're protected and the better we all are.
Yeah, this is urgent. We've had a lot of questions about the safety of vaccines for older people. Here's one of those.
Hello, my name is Kelly Ip. I live in Vancouver and I just turned 80. So I look forward to getting my shots within next month or two. But some of my friends who are in their 60s and 70s are a bit reluctant to do so. They worry about there may be side effects. So how can we convince them that it's fine, it's okay to get the shots?
Dr. Sinha, how safe are these vaccines for seniors?
The good news is these vaccines have now been tested and evaluated through Health Canada. They have very stringent standards. No methods were actually cut along the way to try and actually to fast track these vaccines. These vaccines have been found to be incredibly safe, and the great news is that now that most of the seniors in England, most of the seniors in Israel have been vaccinated, we found these to be incredibly safe. And the good news is actually that side effects that usually occur in younger people are not occurring as often in older people, because their immune systems can't usually mount a strong enough immune response around the side effects. However, they're still showing about a 95% effectiveness in seniors. So they're getting the benefit without necessarily the same level of side effects, which is the best news of all.
And Dr. Chung, how are you approaching seniors who might be hesitant to get it?
So I think trust is really important. If they have a family physician who can speak with them or people that they know and trust, that's very important. So relationship building is obviously helpful. The other thing is that I use examples. So there is a nursing home that I am affiliated with, and they have had 90% uptake of the vaccine with no significant side effects. And the other 10%, they were just waiting to see what happened with the 90% that got vaccinated. And since they had no side effects, they are now, now they're going to go forward with it. But we do have to be very sensitive to the effects of different racial groups' experience with the vaccine. So in Vancouver, a lot of the Philippine community are very suspicious of vaccinations of any kind because of a bad experience that happened years ago in the Philippines. So that is something we have to be very sensitive about.
Dr. Chung, Dr. Sinha, thank you both so much for joining us. Obviously, we couldn't get through all the questions. So for more answers from the doctors, follow us, please, on Twitter at CBC The National.
Well, next, the hospital can be a pretty scary place, but there are ways to make it easier.
When we finally were united together in the hospital, we just shouted hallelujah.
How a small request made all the difference.
And later, how the pandemic is actually helping some kids go further on their field trips.
Welcome back. Over the past year, so many patients hospitalized with COVID-19 have been suffering alone with no family at their bedsides. But does it always have to be that way? A U.S. study looked at the medical benefits of getting patients closer to their loved ones. And as Katie Simpson shows us, there may be a lot we don't understand about how being together can help heal.
A deep breath with ease, a short stroll with his wife. Thinking about these kinds of moments helped Fred Reyes survive a brutal 66-day-long hospital stay.
He was one of the sickest patients on the COVID ICU floor and had been there the longest. He almost died 3 times.
As he fought for his life, his wife Sharon wasn't allowed to see him for the first 6 weeks because of COVID restrictions. The hospital finally changed its visitation policy, and Sharon was allowed to stand outside his room looking in through a window.
It was quite emotional. I still get choked up thinking about it because I felt privileged. I really did. And I still do. I feel blessed and privileged and just so grateful for having a second chance.
Reyes says seeing his wife made his journey less confusing and credits her presence and later her touch with helping in his recovery.
It was important to be brought back to reality daily.
Virginia and Tom Stevens' COVID experience was traumatic at first. When the 88-year-olds had to be hospitalized, they were originally placed in separate rooms.
They found my dad wandering the halls, and he was looking for my mom.
Their medical team at Vanderbilt Hospital brought the couple together. They see it as the start of their long and slow recovery.
When we finally were united together in the hospital, we just shouted hallelujah.
I firmly believe that the family and the loved ones at the bedside are helping these people to physically heal.
Dr. Wes Ely is writing a book about humanizing critical care, and he wants more hospitals to find ways to safely bring patients together with loved ones.
This harm that people are experiencing in the hospital has definitely not been limited to the virus itself. It's also emotional harm.
Oh, you got it. Kathy Henderson is still processing losing both parents to COVID. They were married for 61 years and admitted to different hospitals at first, but she was able to convince the care teams involved that her mom Mary and dad Philip should be reunited, if only for a brief moment.
She was rubbing his hand saying, Phil Hill, I'm here.
2 days after they held hands, both died, just hours apart.
Grief comes in waves. You know, you think you're doing good, and then you hear a song or, smell a smell, or somebody will say something and it'll knock you down again.
Henderson doesn't think the visit did anything to help her parents medically, but she's relieved it happened.
From a personal standpoint, from a human relational standpoint, it made a huge difference.
Preserving memories is Henderson's focus now, and she takes comfort in knowing her parents had one final goodbye. As doctors study human connections and recoveries, they may just very well find it also helps survivors as they try to go on. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
COVID has called off a lot of travel, but it cannot steal the joy of a field trip.
Let's start looking at the art.
To be able to go somewhere that's really big and exciting, they were excited to try it out.
Next, how the world is opening up to students in these COVID times.
I wanted to pay you a compliment.
Well, I'm listening.
I think we work well together.
Can you move?
You have to stop.
Why aren't they moving?
You're a good cop. If we would work as a team to go after Randy and Steph Bone, we could take down the Stockwood crew. We could do it, Duff. We could do it together.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast Front Burner, Church as COVID Battleground and how the pandemic is testing the limits of religious freedom in BC. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, before the pandemic, school field trips gave students something they could really use right now: fresh air and a break from the everyday routine. But as with so many other things, lockdowns have forced those real-world experiences online. So, Tiana Sumanak-Johnson shows us how some classrooms are making the most of it.
Introduced our special guests.
In a year of limited adventures for school kids, these Thunder Bay students get to go to the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto every Friday, virtually.
So to be able to go somewhere that's really big and exciting, they were excited to try it out.
So let's start looking at the art.
As part of the program, experts talk about art in an engaging, kid-friendly way. The spotlight this month is on Black artists, including spoken word performer IMF.
Honestly, for me, I want the kids to be inspired, to take this and start something of their own. I think art, is beautiful, it's powerful.
They tell you to straighten your hair. The lessons have inspired student artwork, but also other discussions. Some previous sessions looked at Indigenous artists.
My school was looking at lots of things with treaties and things at that time when we first started them. So it just felt like everything clicked and pieced together and the kids were making connections.
You're about to take your students on a field trip like no other.
Students can now learn about politics with a tour of Parliament Hill, or take a trip to the Calgary Zoo to learn about animals, all without ever leaving the classroom. It's good news for students and teachers, but also for the institutions.
See if you recognize some of this music.
The Vancouver Symphony Orchestra has been able to reach 4 times as many students virtually as it was through traditional school visits in the pre-COVID days.
Now we're able to deliver it right to them no matter where they are, urban, remote, in BC, not in BC. We have subscribers from all over the world, which has been really, really exciting.
Let's try it backwards this time.
And since schools often don't have money for field trips, this may be one part of COVID education that will stick around after the pandemic. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Next on The National, some history behind a beloved spicy snack. Why Torontonians are celebrating Jamaican patties today. Our moment is next.
Black music has a new home on the block. Hip hop, Afro pop, and more. This is our music. The Block, weeknights at 7 on CBC Music.
In Jamaica, these pastries are called beef patties. But in Canada, that name is illegal.
That was from 1985, and at the beginning of that year, the Canadian government claimed the snack known as Jamaican patties didn't match the technical definition of a beef patty and wanted the name changed. But on this date in that year, the community claimed the name Jamaican beef patties. Now, February 23rd is known in Toronto as Patty Day. Our moment tonight includes the man who helped make that happen.
I think it's great that we've reached this milestone. We were able to come up with this phrase, Jamaican patty, as opposed to just patty.
A lot of Jamaicans, my family included, have brought with us, when we migrated here to Canada.
6 minutes, please.
So it's important to recognize that in the history and what they are and what they taste and part of our identity and our culture.
Currently in Toronto, we sell more patties in the GTA than any other city in North America. They're delicious and they're nutritious and they're quite affordable. We've been able to sell them at bowling alleys, at movie theaters, at convenience stores, at restaurants. When you go to the store, you see everybody's buying patties.
There's jerk chicken patties, there's beef patties, there's chicken patties, there's veggie patties. I'm so glad it's widespread and people enjoy it and people understand the history and why we love it, and kind of reminds you of home when you eat it.
Okay, so firstly, hungry. Secondly, Michael, who was in that back in the day in 1985, he was threatened with $5,000 worth of fines.
Wow.
He still has a shop in Kensington Market.
Right.
He is still selling them.
Well, and especially in the context of a pandemic where you feel so much, right, for all of these local businesses that are just struggling to make ends meet. Any reason to celebrate and commemorate is surely welcome. That's The National for this February 23rd. Have a great night.
Good night.